God kveld, velkommen til Tabloid. Han skyldig for antisemitisme, rasisme og for å ha fornektet holocaust. Han ble invitert til litteraturfestivalen på Lillehammer, men det førte til så mye bråk at invitasjonen ble trekk tilbake. Nå forbereder politiet seg på bråk og demonstrasjoner når David Irving ventet til Lillehammer i morgen. Men akkurat nå han her i Tabloid. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me here.
What is your reaction to the fact that the invitation you got from the festival at Lillehammer was withdrawn?
I was first of all very proud to receive the invitation, and then I was very insulted, not only that it was withdrawn so quickly, but the manner in which they withdrew it. They said, quite wrongly in my view, they said that they had invited me as an example of a liar. It was a very quick excuse on their part, I think. I think the one honourable thing that happened was that Stig Zetterbecken, the man who was the cultural director of the festival, I think he resigned.
But he's the one who said that you're invited because you're a falsifier of history.
I don't think he said that. I think that the president of the festival finally said that at a press conference.
I've seen what he's written, and that's what he said.
Well, I don't know who he gets that from. I think the problem is that too few people in Norway have read my books. A lot of people in the rest of the world have read my books, and I think if more people read my books, they would see that I'm not the way that I'm described.
And a lot of people in the rest of the world say you are a falsifier.
Yes, and we know what their agenda is. They don't like the books I write because I write what I find actually happened. I write politically incorrect history. I think I write the kind of history that will stand up for 100 years, whereas most modern history is written for the day. You reach a point when you write history as a historian where you have a choice. Either you write books to make money, or you write books to, as Churchill said, the job of a historian is to find out what happened and why.
And that's what you're doing.
I try and find out what happened, and even if I don't like what happened, even I know my readers won't like what happened, I write it the way it was.
We'll come back to that in a moment. I just want your comment on the fact that your hotel reservations were cancelled too.
Yeah, it's nothing new. They can't debate me, and so they silence me. My opponents around the world have used methods to try and silence me, beginning in a campaign in about 1991. I started what I call my international campaign for real history, like real beer in England, the real ale campaign. And real history, I think, is the kind of history that you write straight from the archives into the books with no political input. And once that real history began to be published, with the new edition of my Hitler biography, for example, then behind the scenes this campaign started to silence me. And I've seen the evidence. I've seen the secret meetings of political groups and so on.
What kind of political groups?
Oh, the Holocaust Educational Trust in Britain. In November 1991, they had a secret meeting which was attended by a non-Jewish historian, David Fox, a very upright, respectable historian. And he was so angry when he heard them plotting to put pressure on my publisher, Macmillan, one of the biggest English publishers, that he resigned. He said, I'm not going to go along with this.
But has it crossed your mind that people are deeply offended by your allegations?
Yes.
They don't believe that you're telling the truth.
Yeah.
And to the people who lost their whole families in the concentration camps, what you're saying is preposterous.
A lot of people died in World War II, not just Jews, not just gypsies, not just homosexuals. A lot of ordinary Norwegians, Germans, Dutch and French and other countries, innocent people died. I think that the real crime in World War II wasn't genocide, it was killing of innocent people in what I call innocenticide. That was the real crime. And once you start limiting it just to one group of people and say, well, it's a crime when they did it to the Jews, but it wasn't a crime when it happened to the people in Hiroshima or Coventry or Dresden. That's where, as an Englishman, I say, no, I want to write level history, a level playing.
We have to finish this thing about Lillehammer before we go deeply into the subject.
Yes, I'm going there in a few days' time.
Yes, you decided to go anyway.
Yes.
So what are you going to do there?
Yes, I mean, people think they can silence me by saying, OK, we're not going to invite you. Norway is a free country. I can go if I want.
But it's also secret.
A lot of people wrote to me from Norway.
They did?
Saying, David Irving, we want to hear you speak. I don't know who they are, but they wrote and said, we really want to hear you speak. I've got a list of 50 or 60 names.
They might be neo-Nazis.
They might be. I hope they are. Because
why?
If they are...
Is it so good to be embraced by the neo-Nazis?
No, I don't want to be embraced by them, but I think having neo-Nazis in an audience is a good thing, because then I can then say, hey, fellas, you're slightly wrong here and you're right there. They need to be corrected in their views.
So they're slightly wrong?
They're a lot wrong in some respects. They're very clever. But
what are you going to speak? What are you going to speak about? When are you going to speak? Where are you going to speak in Lillehammer? It's also secret.
It has to be. I mean, you've seen today the reasons why I have to keep my movement secret. Even though I announced yesterday that I was already in Oslo, there was a big crowd of unpleasant people waiting for me at the airport today when I did arrive. So I have to be careful. I've suffered a lot of real violence from people who don't want me to speak.
So what are you going to speak about?
When I go to Lillehammer at the end of this week, I'm going to be speaking on one special aspect of history, which is the kind of history that you can write if you use just one category of documents. And these are the decoded documents. In Britain, we had the world's best decoding organization. We had 30,000 experts decoding German.
And you're going into all these, and
yes.
you also found news about Norway.
Yes.
What is that?
You find things that set you back. You think, whoa, this isn't what I believed, because it's not the politically correct version of history. About Norway, for example, I wrote my very first or second book about the German atomic bomb project. Here in Norway, you had the only source of heavy water at Vemork, Norsk Hydro. And I wrote a book about the German atomic bomb project. Now, 44 years later, I'm reading the German messages decoded by the British, which reveal that 2 glider loads of British commandos landed, Operation Freshman. One glider crashed, the other glider went missing. The one that landed safely here in Norway, 20 commandos were rounded up by the Norwegian police. And the Norwegian police turned these British commanders over to the Germans, and the Germans executed them all.
It is common knowledge that these people, these Englishmen, were killed by the Germans.
Yes.
But you're blaming this on the Norwegians.
Well, the wider lesson to be learned here is that just as in France, where the French liked to believe that they were a nation of resistors, and that the resistance in France is the most important thing that they did in World War II, if you read the German documents, you hardly notice the resistance. It didn't happen. And now the same in Norway. You find out that in Norway, the Norwegians were a peace-loving people who were very happy once the hostilities had ended in 1940, and you lived a very peaceful war until 1945. And you were quite happy with the Germans here.
But are you saying the Norwegians
collaborated?
They collaborated to a large extent?
Yes. They collaborated to the degree that the Germans needed. Very, very few resistance cells in Norway. And the decoded messages make this case quite clearly.
That Norwegians collaborated?
The Norwegians collaborated with the Germans.
So you have the proof?
It's there in these tens of thousands of pages of decoded messages. The problem is the academics are far too important to do the groundwork of reading through these files.
But how am I going to believe this? Because you've been accused of tampering with evidence, of changing words. And there was even a lawsuit in England, which you lost. And the conclusion of that lawsuit was that you are a falsifier of history. Yes, so how am I going to believe that what you're saying about Norway is the truth?
I'm happy to rest on my record as an author. In England, my father used to say, British justice is the best that money can buy. And in the case you're referring to, which I fought in the year 2000 against an American academic who called me a Holocaust denier.
Yeah, and you lost. She was proven right.
She rounded up $13 million with which she bought the High Court in England.
She bought the court.
She bought the witnesses.
And you were innocent.
The witnesses were paid nearly £1 million each to give their opinion about David Irving. And so a witness says, well, yes, David Irving's a liar, he's a falsifier. Where's the cash, please?
But you lost.
Yes.
At the end, you lost.
Yes, but
because she had more money?
The records show I'm right. I'll give you one example. The judge said, David Irving said that 130,000 people were killed in the British air raid on Dresden. The real figure is 25,000, according to the judge. Now, in the decoded messages, only 2 weeks ago, in Britain, in the British archives, as I'm now reaching the end of reading the decoded messages, there's the decoded message from the police chief of Dresden, who reports to Berlin. He says, we have 100,000 missing in Dresden. So my figure was correct.
Okay.
So I'm quite happy to rest on my record.
You seem to be very infatuated by Hitler. You're real